Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast, JD Edwards Orchestrator for Techies. My name is Kaylin Hensley, Marketing Coordinator with GSI. I'm also very pleased to welcome our main presenter, John Bassett. John is a seasoned IT specialist with more than 25 years of experience as a software engineer, network manager, systems implementer, and JD Edwards EnterpriseOne technology expert. Now, before we get started, I wanted to give you a chance to review our Safe Harbor statement. Now for a quick overview of today's meeting, which will last about 60 minutes. First, we would like to take a moment to go over a couple of housekeeping items, as well as provide a brief company overview. Then we will turn it over to John to get into our main presentation and demo, which will last about 40 minutes. Next, we'll take a minute to go over upcoming educational events, and then we'll wrap up with a 10-minute Q&A session. If you would like to submit a question, you can do so through the questions panel at the bottom of the GoToWebinar console window located on the right side of your screen. Please note that questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So if you would like to minimize your GoToWebinar console during the presentation, just click the right-facing arrow key on the top left of the console. Clicking the left arrow key will return the console so that you can input your questions. And now I would like to give you a brief overview of GSI. GSI is a full-service JD Edwards consulting organization. We're an Oracle Platinum partner that was founded in 2004 and now have over 100 employees. We have offices nationwide and are recognized on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest-growing companies in the U.S. GSI specializes in project consulting, managed services, and cloud and hosting services, and all of our services are backed with a 100% guarantee. GSI also provides a broad spectrum of business, functional, and technical consulting services for Oracle NetSuite, Oracle Cloud, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and other enterprise applications. In addition, we are a product development company that has many popular products, including Genius, which is our advanced monitoring and performance analytics solution for JD Edwards or any business-critical system on any platform. Genesis is our load stress testing application for system design, validation, or expansion for JD Edwards or any web-based business-critical system. G Shield is our comprehensive security solution for JD Edwards, including password reset and 2FA authentication. Rapid Reconciler, which allows you to effectively manage your inventory in transit and R&V reconciliation processes for any version of E1 or World. Rapid Approval is a Salesforce App Exchange solution that streamlines the approval request process. And now I would like to turn things over to John for our main presentation and demo.
Okay, so it's my turn. How are you doing today? Doing good. All right, let's change presenter. Well, you made me the presenter. All right, Kaylin, just want to make sure you can see my screen. If you can, usually everybody else can.
Yes, I can, John.
All right, welcome everybody. Today's webcast is highly technical. If you're here to learn how to create orchestrations and how to best utilize all of the notifications and other goodies inside of it, that's not what this session's for. This is for the CNC guy who's got to get it up and running and configured and talking with the system. So strictly for techies, generally speaking, CNC folks. So what we'll do today is we'll go over the technical overview of the orchestrator, just some of the components, some of it a little bit overlap with what the developers need to use, but just so you know, those of you that I'm assuming you know nothing, we'll go over the checklist on things that you need in order to do the do the installation, MTR review. Then we'll actually get into extreme detail on the actual Orchestrator installation process. I've got screen-by-screen prints of the various things that you need to do. Now, I won't go into detail on every one of those screen prints, but we'll talk about it as we progress through. Like I take pictures of the, every time you have to click the next box, etc. Kind of boring, but if you're taking these slides afterwards, you should be able to use it as a guide to get an install done, along with some of the links that we send, which is the next thing. Or excuse me, that I'll share a bunch of links to documentation as well. Then once the install is done, we'll show you how you access the Orchestrator Studio and the testing client that comes along with it. So I know that we say demo, but the demo is just kind of be me showing you an actual working Orchestrator, and then we'll get to the question and answer session. So technical overview of Orchestrator. I'm not going to read this word for word. Originally, the Orchestrator was called the IoT Orchestrator because it was designed to be used as first part with just IoT type devices. And I think that Oracle realized that they had something pretty good here. It didn't have to be used with just IoT. You could use it as a way to design integrations with third-party offerings. It does use the AIS server, so it is a requirement to have an AIS server. If you're using any features of UX1, you need an AIS server as well. An AIS is just a JVM. 3 out of 4 times, you could probably just use an existing web server and slap on another JVM. Other places like to have separate installation out there, separate web server for it, and that's fine too. And then sitting on top of the installation is the Orchestrator Studio, and really that's just it's just a tool, the web-based tool that business analysts can use to design and implement orchestrations. It used to be the very first stages, maybe 3 years ago, you'd have to know quite a bit about XML, and you almost had to be a developer in order to write an orchestration. I know Oracle is saying citizen developer, that anybody could sit down and design an orchestration. I would say that it does require some skill, requires some reading and understanding. You have to understand the structure of JD Edwards files. You have to understand what some of the different files mean, and you have to be able to understand the components that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So it's not as simple as citizen developer, but a good solid business analyst who has access to a CNC and a developer should be able to get through it. So again, you have to have the you need the Orchestrator along with the AIS server. So basically, just some of the things that you can use here is connect IoT type of data from Internet of Things devices. Maybe it's a device, an ODB connect into an automobile that you, or some kind of truck or equipment that you use to do equipment maintenance on. You can also do other integrations to cloud services and other third party. So it's basically it's another way to bring data into your system. We had one of our friends and business partners actually wrote an Excel spreadsheet program to tie in. I think it's an offering you can buy out there. I forget the name of the company that bought it. I think it was the same place that did Spreadsheet Server. They bought it, so you can actually get a spreadsheet that to transform data via Excel. Now, a lot of people say, well, I have that in the form of Z files and et cetera, but not everything has a Z file in JD Edwards. This would allow you to get data into tables that don't have one written by default. Now, I will, I have some of my own advice on some of these. If you're looking for a high volume system where you want to transfer millions of records. I'm not sure that AIS server is the best way to do that. I think you'd want to consider BSSV server or some other direct mechanism, or using a tool like Magic Software. But if you're looking for something that is small, maybe 3,000-4,000 records, something you repeat on a daily basis, this is a good tool for that. And so here's the architecture, a sample architecture, and I've got a couple more slides to show you regarding this. So give me a second here. I didn't have my main slide up on the deck that I was watching at. So this is basically the communication between the JD Edwards and various AIS server clients. You notice you have your EnterpriseOne system over here on the right-hand side. You've got your enterprise server, you've got your database server, and you've got an HTML server. And sitting right here is an AIS server, and then you've got the outside world over to the left. Now, an AIS server is effectively running a behind-the-scenes client. It's like an end user, like me sitting down at a JD Edwards browser and typing things in. So the AIS server is kind of acting like I call it, in a sense, a screen scraper, or replaces a human being sitting there typing things in. So anything that you can do from a web client, you could actually find a way to integrate it in via the AIS server. So the AIS server is a way for you to get outside devices to enter data into the system. Again, I refer sometimes to AIS servers. Think of it like a screen scraper that would scrape the screen of your JD Edwards screen. It's more complicated than that, folks. But if you're struggling to understand it, that's a good way to look at it. So here's a best practice architecture, very similar to the previous slide, but you'll notice that we added a separate set of servers for separate from the business applications. Like maybe you have mobile devices or specific interfaces. And the reason why I like this is a best practice, not just coming from GSI, it's coming from the folks from Oracle too, is it's easier to monitor if you have separate servers. You can if something crashes or things start to hang, you've got your traffic isolated from your normal business users. So just keep in mind that you don't always want to put everything in the company through one single interface. So the Orchestrator it provides the critical processing capability for JD Edwards apps to provide, consume, process data from devices other than software interfaces. So things like sensors, or maybe CRM software. So it could be software as well, but other than an actually written interface. And here are the basic building blocks. And this slide comes from Oracle. I'm not reinventing anything here. This comes straight from the Orchestrator installation guide, where you basically start. The orchestration is defined by all of these devices put together. The physical devices, and in some cases you might actually need a gateway or a hub. If you're going out and did a Google search on IoT, you're going to find a lot of references to having gateways, and sometimes you might hear that word called a hub. It's basically a data gathering point. Many devices, maybe you have 10,000 sensors feeding data into a certain point. The hub is a way to filter out, garbage ahead of time that might have high volume, although the orchestration has further clarification in the form of whitelists and rules engine, but the hub could filter out pure noise that might flood the JD Edwards orchestration. So you may need it, you may not need it. It's something you'd have to study with whatever application is. But if you're a business analyst, it's maybe not something you need to worry about right away. So we're going to talk about each of these here in a second. What the whitelist is, rules, cross-reference. And the service request is basically the guts of the orchestrator. The whitelist is basically what allowed devices can come in and et cetera. So, and then of course the service request goes and processes the individual JD Edwards applications, PXXS, whatever your app is. So these are the building blocks that it takes to use the orchestrator. Some of the capabilities of it. There's some really cool notifications that are coming in it, and messaging that is now a part of it. So, Oracle is developing some default content for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about getting the samples later from it. On where to find the samples and how to install them. I've got a link for you. But just some of the things that you can do. You can use it as a connector. This is a REST-based protocol. A lot of other things that I can tell you are REST-based. If you use ServiceNow, it's the ticket tracking system. It's REST-based. Salesforce is REST-based. So there's a lot of things that you could talk to already. File transfer, you can use it to do FTP. There is a process recorder that is really cool. It allows you to actually get into, when you're designing your orchestration, you can basically record what you're doing in JD Edwards first and then make an orchestration out of it later. So if you want some certain device coming into, like maybe you've got a web application that you want somebody to be able to create their own address book entry. You could write an orchestration that by getting into the address book application, record that session and create that orchestration from what you actually did by running the app. You can also do custom code in Java or Groovy. GSI's Genius product has some Groovy scripting in it. So there's a lot of capabilities here, connectors to databases, messaging, scheduling, watch list capabilities, really overwhelming capabilities inside of it. And it's probably why we have so many people on today. We have 109 people. That's a pretty good showing. Thanks for coming today. One of the things that is often overlooked, though, is security. And I'm not going to get into too much on security because we could talk about this in great detail, but I want to provide just some high-level advice to you. And this was something that one of our couple of our business partners and I have shared with people at some of our presentations. Make sure that you use encryption in setting up your communication. REST-based applications. REST uses a technology over HTTP and JSON. So HTTP is an unencrypted technology. So use HTTPS. So use some kind of SSL or TLS encryption. And an absolute must in anything you do with an orchestrator. Never use default passwords. It's amazing how many people just use default passwords. My guess is if you tried to sign onto an average system and you typed in JDE, you might actually get in because a lot of people have used that for the default. Just change it up. That alone is going to knock down 90% of your hacks. Keep software updates current, not necessarily talking about JD Edwards here. I'm talking about edge software, especially devices that are security oriented. The patching for security devices is a leapfrog technology. Hackers find a problem, the programmers plug the hole. It keeps on going over and over again. So if you keep software updates, just like virus protection, keeping your updates, it'll help. And also take an end-to-end approach. 95% of all IoT devices out there do not offer any kind of security on them. You can buy IoT devices on Amazon or anywhere, eBay or go to Wish, and you can get IoT devices for a couple of dollars or a buck. But you can get some really cool heat sensors, temperature sensors, dirt cheap, but they don't have the security capability. And if you're going to be security conscious for your business, think of an end-to-end approach, all the way from the device that's collecting the data or program that's collecting the data through the APIs that might be transforming your data, the hub gateways, firewalls, all the way up to your JD Edwards system, front end, web, AIS server, database server, and all of that. Think of it that way. And that advice actually comes from the IoT Security Foundation. I don't want to take credit for it, but really good website to go to. Again, that's the IoT Security Foundation if you're worried about security. Okay, so let's get down to the installation side of things. The material in today's webcast was accurate as of today. So we need to make sure you look at the latest MTRs. For instance, I went out there and I found out, oh, hey, you know what? Tools 9227 and 9231 are now available. Those weren't available when I first did this webcast back at the end of November. So you need the Orchestrator installation guide. You need the JD Edwards EnterpriseOne Server Manager guide. You need a JD Edwards HTML instance. You need an AIS instance, and you need a separate web server for BI Publisher. And we recommend a separate server for BI Pub because what happens is the BI Pub installation does an extension of WebLogic, and if you're going to run it on an existing web server, you risk bringing it down. And one of the installation documents from Oracle says that you can try it running it on the same as your HTML server, but there are known instances where it corrupts the WebLogic install. So we just got around that and saying, hey, you know, don't fight that battle. Get a separate web server for the BI Publisher side of it. Then you have to download and install Orchestrator Studio and samples if you want it, and loading them as well. So that's the checklist of things that you need in order to do an install. So here's the MTR guide. I'll let you refer back to it. Different versions of WebLogic. You do need WebLogic server for Orchestrator Studio because you need the ADF runtime module. So if you're running a flavor of 923, you can use Orchestrator 7.0.x. And if I did this particular webcast based on Orchestrator Studio 6.1.3, we happen to be on tools 9224, but 9227 is out now. As you start getting down to these lower levels of MTRs, I'd actually tell you not to bother. Don't install it. You might be the tools release you're on, but you're going to struggle so much installing it. It would be easier for you to do a tools release, and I would, advise your business, say, look, if we want to use Orchestrator, we need and you can do, you can look at the feature set to justify your existence. So from a techie, you're going to fight the install on the lower MTRs. But the good news is that in asking for your tools release, you can explain to them the features that you're going to get in the Orchestrator that you can't do in the lower releases. And I think the buy-off from the business will be there. If they can't, if you just can't, well, then you can try, but I'm just going to warn you, you're going to struggle. 5.1 is going to be a little bit more of a struggle than if you were to do the 7.0. It's really grown up a lot. Oracle's made a ton of changes. They've gone from version 3.1 to 4, 5, 6, and now 7 inside of 2.5 years. So they've obviously put a lot of support into this. So yeah, here's some even older ones, 2, 3, and 4. I would just abandon ship, guys, on 2 and 3. It's like I'd wait until you can take a tools release to do those. Okay, so installing the EnterpriseOne Studio through Server Manager. Fortunately, starting with 5.0, you can do it through Server Manager. And I just have some sample mappings here. 923. Starting with 923, you can use the Orchestrator Studio 7.x. And most of the manuals that I have in here for to links are now for 7, the 7 flavor. 9224, 5, 6, and 7 work on Orchestrator Studio 6.1. So I just wanted to give you the guidelines there. Okay, so let's start talking a little about the installation process here. Orchestrator Studio was built around the Oracle Application Development Framework, and therefore it must be deployed on Oracle WebLogic Server. So many of you are, if any of you are on IBM's WebSphere, if you, if you're licensed for, I'm not sure how the licensing goes, is what I'm saying. It would be something you would need to talk to your Oracle rep to see what you can do. You do need an AIS server. It is a requirement, and again, Oracle recommends two AIS servers, one for testing, one for production use. And in some cases, in production, you might want to split things out for the different types of applications. Like if you're using mobile apps to come in through the AIS server, then they would recommend a separate one for things that you're using Orchestrator Studio for. Okay, for AIS server deployed on WebLogic, there's an additional requirement that enables the Orchestrator client, and that's a tool that basically you use for testing orchestrations. And if you're not going to be using that tool, you don't need to worry about this. So I'm going to show it to you. Basically, the Orchestrator client is a web interface that allows you to act like an IoT device. So basically, you get in and you enter data as if it was a sensor dumping data in. And if you click on this, when you get the PDF and you click on the link, you can see I've got the direct link to the topic inside of Oracle on what you need to do, but it is a requirement. Okay, now this is another techie decision, CNC decision. For Oracle WebLogic Server 12.1.3, you have to install Oracle WebLogic Server and then configure it with the runtime libraries for Oracle ADF. Folks, I did that one time. It was 3 days. Now, granted, I was learning it for the first time, but even after that, I just thought it was a bear. So you'll note that it said if you're using Oracle Fusion middleware 12.2.1.2 or higher to install Oracle WebLogic Server, it comes pre-configured to support ADF, and the additional configuration of runtime libraries is not required. So read into my little hint there. Since you're getting to install a separate server for it, I would go with 12.2.1 or higher, even if you're running an older version of WebLogic Server for your web server. You'll want to check the MTR cross-reference to make sure it all works, but we've had several people tell us that the newer middleware infrastructure would work no problem with the older version of WebLogic 12.1.3 that they've had installed. Might be time to think about a WebLogic Server upgrade at that time too. Okay, so now I'm going to just kind of walk you through the installation process. This is going to be a little boring, folks, but a lot of techie material I deliver is boring, but extremely informative and useful in that this is what you need to actually get it done, and that is the purpose and goal of this session. Sure, GSI can do this. If you don't want to do it, we can do it, but this is to help you out on your own. You notice I used 12.2.1.3.0 on it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is install the middleware foundation. So I'm basically just going to follow through some of the prompts, clicking next. If you don't like where it's installed, I just put middleware for a place to put it. Clicking next through all of the things that need to be installed. Java version, you notice I've got a little error here, or excuse me, a warning. In this particular case, I just happen to be running an older version of Java. We have at GSI have had a lot of problems with the versions of Java causing issues with the Orchestrator Studio and getting the middleware installed. We've had to downgrade several times, and that's why, because of some of these the features of Java that got changed around. So double check and get into the Knowledge Garden. You may find yourself using a version of 1.8 that's, I think we use like 151 version 151 because we just know it works. But do a little bit of homework on your Java version. Give yourself that half an hour of homework on it to save yourself 5 or 6 hours of troubleshooting. You get halfway there and realize your Java version's a problem. So the reason why we got the warning is because I did downgrade and used an older version of Java that I know would work. So in this case, just review everything. Make sure you got the right amount of disk space. You've got your installation location, what features you're installing. Notice top link it gets installed anyway. You used to have to do that separately. And so just keep an eye on things. It takes about on our server, which is sitting up in an Amazon lab, AWS. We have one in Azure, and we have one in Oracle Cloud as well. So this particular one came from AWS. Okay, so then you just click finish, and that's all there is to installing the base foundation. That takes about a half hour. So after you've got the core code down, you've got to go through and configure the ADF repository. So the repository is a database, and the only two options I'm aware of are Oracle and SQL Server. I had someone tell me earlier this week that they stored it in a local file system based database, and I don't believe that's what happened. I don't, because I've never seen that as an option. So this particular example with SQL Server, we've installed it in Oracle as well, and they both work. So you have to create the repository. You have to basically provide it with a server name, ports, etc. So again, I'll go through this here. You got to give it the required database name, give it a prefix, click next. And the reason for the prefix would be if you wanted to install like a development environment, which would be a different set of credentials, you could do it that way. You can cluster these installations. So just keep in mind there is a BI publisher clustering if you need multiple servers and need to scale. So I'm not assuming any of the clustering in this case. This is not an advanced installation. So then all you do is once you've got your prefix, click the create button. Assuming you entered everything okay for your host name, your port name, and who you're connecting as and the password, you click the create button, and basically it's done. So it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to configure the repository. So after that, you have to get in and configure WebLogic administration. So again, clustering is going to be a little bit different, but if it's standalone, we had one client that did 3 standalone servers, and then they basically had a robocopy that manually distributed the objects from the 3 separate servers. So you can do clustering multiple ways. The way they chose to do it, they avoided any shared database issues, and that's fine. I probably would go with the cluster where everybody shares the same database, but there's a different process for servers 2, 3, etc. You wouldn't necessarily create the domain in those cases. So basically, you got to tell it where it's going to go, the location on the disk drive, and you basically need to make sure you have the Oracle JRF components installed. Java, I think that's Java runtime features. I've forgotten what the JRF means. I studied it because when I did my first Orchestrator install 3 years ago, it wasn't so easy to get this part of the installation done, and you have to make sure the JRF was up and running, and it wasn't so simple. So make sure you select that along with the defaults. Click next. You have to put in a name and password that you can remember for your WebLogic administration user. You need to make sure you select production. It should find your installation of Java. If not, you might have to specify it if you put it in a different spot, or if it can't find it for some reason, maybe it's not in the path, especially in Linux. You might have to go browsing for it. Okay, so now you've got to enter the database information. That should match when you did the repository creation. So you click the Get RCU config. Hopefully it pulls everything in, and you click Next. So complete the schema owner section down here. If it's not populated, it should be, and then click the next button. And then you want to click test selected connections just to make sure that all 5 of the databases can be spoken to. And I have had problems with that in the past, but make sure the test is successful, and then you click next. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to select the administrative server and node manager. Click next. Then go through this to basically listen to all ports. Many of you have seen this before. If you are installing WebLogic server, you just specify the WebLogic user and password, and then you click create, and then that's that part of it. The Java runtime features are all installed. You click finish. Note these particular email address, or excuse me, URLs. This admin console is very important if you've got to get in and change JVM sizes, etc. So you might want to jot down that link or click on it and then bookmark it. That's what I do. Okay, I just wanted to show you a sample setup from GSI's lab. This is our AWS lab. Believe it or not, all of what I just showed you was the install process to get through it. It seems simple, and it is if nothing goes wrong, but it can take you a few weeks or not a few weeks, a few hours to find all the components you need to download, get yourself acclimated to the system. So I just wanted to show you this. We're having problems with our with our lab today. It is up and running, but I don't have all of the components are not speaking in Server Manager. I can get to the links though, and I want to show you the link as well. So we basically have an enterprise server, a web server for basically HTML services. That's JD Jazz 01. JD Jazz 02 is basically our WebLogic server. And then we have our management console box, Server Manager box, and our deployment server. So a couple things to check that you need to make sure that you have set up. I'll show you our lab in a minute. When you get into the EnterpriseOne server, this is the HTML server, you need to look at this form service section and make sure that you choose your AIS protocol and who your AI host is coming from. If you're doing clustering, there's more to this than that. You might need to use virtual IPs versus host names or versus IP names, but also keeping the port number. Basically, this is telling the web server to allow traffic coming in from an AIS host. Otherwise, the traffic gets bounced. It's a protection. Likewise, the AIS server needs to be configured to point to a web server. It's like, where's my JD Edwards? Remember we said that the AIS server is basically running like a client software. Like it's like you sitting at the screen from the behind the scenes, but you got to tell it where to go and what protocol to use. We've got HTTP in our lab, but I would highly recommend HTTPS. It's not that difficult to configure. A lot of people think that they have to get registered names, but you don't have to. You can use a self-signed certificate, especially for a development name. You only need an assigned certificate if for some reason you need to prove who you are. And that happens especially if you're a public company and you're going through an audit. The auditors don't like to see an unsigned certificate, but an unsigned certificate does give you the encryption, and that gives you 99% of what you need from it. So that's just my opinion. So also the Orchestrator Studio has to be told where the AIS server is in port number, just like the HTML server needed to be told as well. Just wanted to give you some sample configuration. Here's some key links in the Orchestrator Studio. I will actually show you samples of this on our system in a second. Wanted to give you some key links here. So document ID, installation of JD Edwards Orchestrator components, Orchestrator Studio issues. I promised you, the Orchestrator guide, Server Manager guide earlier when we were talking. Here's the link to that. basic authentication that you need. And then I just recently added this one, how to import the Orchestrator samples. Follow that doc ID in Oracle. I could have copied all of their screen prints, but figured you guys could look up a doc ID and fill in the blanks yourself. So before I turn it over to you, Kaylin, I'm going to do a quick demo here. So let me bring up my system. All right, I gotta get it to fit the screen. Okay, so let's move some things around here. So this is GSI's lab I showed you before, a screen print of our system. You notice I've got a little issue with my Orchestrator Studio. We had a problem where all of our instances, our server manager, I had to reboot the server manager and none of the agents were reporting. I had to restart all of the agents. And for some reason, this is showing it as undetermined. However, you'll find out that we actually do have an Orchestrator Studio sign-in. So I'm just going to go ahead and sign into it. You notice the link there, JD Jazz 027075 Orchestrator Studio Faces. And I got that from the link inside of here. If I went into the Orchestrator Studio server when it was up and running, over here came the link to get to it. So if you didn't write it down when you were doing the install, you can always get to it through Server Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Okay. Now, one thing I didn't mention about the Orchestrator Studio is you can see that all of my buttons here are nice and in bold-faced. They're not grayed out. Many times when our technical people have done the installations, they get in and they're like, oh man, nobody can run anything. There is security around being able to run orchestrations. They're UDOs. Just like orchestrations are UDOs, just like watch lists or one-view reports or grids. So they have to be enabled. Orchestrations have to be enabled. So you've got some security around this that you've got to do before anything will work. So if you find yourself signing into this and everything is grayed out, know for certain that you got a couple hours worth of security ahead of you to open things up. So I'm not going to go through how to create an orchestration, the service requests, cross-references, etc. But you can see I mentioned I was going to talk about these earlier, and I forgot to talk about them. The service request is actually how the orchestration is supposed to run. Cross-references is basically it maps input values to JD Edwards values. Except, for example, a device's serial number can be cross-referenced to an asset number. So basically taking, let's say you have a ODB2 sensor device that produces a machine ID, and that machine ID has to equal something, an asset number inside of JD Edwards. That's where you make your cross-reference table. White lists is basically a list of authorized value. For example, a device, bunch of valid serial numbers. It's used for to determine, it's kind of like a filtering list of sorts, what are valid input values. And then rules, and again, a lot of this stuff can be handled by hub devices up front, and maybe some of these aren't even required if you have a hub that filters all that out, but you have the ability within it to make those definitions. And rules just basically define a set of conditions against which the form of devices to produce a true or false state, basically to whether or not something's going to be allowed or not. So I don't want to go into these, but what I did want to show you, if you click on the tools here, you go over here and you have this Orchestrator client that you can click on, basically testing an Orchestrator. So, and if I were to click on it, I'd get this link right here. And if I click login here, it's going to load the Orchestrator client. So this is where you basically have to pick which orchestration, and I didn't load any defaults here. So I can't actually run a sample for you, but had I loaded the defaults, I could pick an orchestration and start testing it. So it allows you to simulate being an actual IoT device or orchestration device if it's not IoT. So really, that's all I wanted to show you from a demo standpoint. This is what it should look like. You may have security associated with it, and you have a client to test it. So with that, Kaylin, I am going to change things back over to you to wrap things up and do question and answer session.
All right, thanks, John. Give me just 1 second. All right, now I would like to cover a few follow-up items and then move to our question and answer section of the webcast. Our webcast today is part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards. Our upcoming webcasts are listed on the screen. To view our most up-to-date schedule, please visit getgsi.com/webcasts. GSI provides extensive free educational resources for the JD Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcasts, monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, online resource center, where you can access our on-demand webcasts, white papers, etc., and on-site and virtual workshops. If you would like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts, our monthly newsletter, or to create an account to access our resource center, go to getgsi.com, go to Platforms on the main menu, and then select JD Edwards, and then select the appropriate link on the left. While I see we've already had several questions submitted, I would like to remind everyone that if you would still like to submit a question, you can do so using the questions panel in the GoToWebinar console window on the right side of your screen. If you minimized your console earlier, please click the left arrow to redisplay the questions panel. All right, let me bring up some of our questions. All right. Okay.
You want me to take them?
I got it. I just can't see the asker for some reason, but the first question says, what would be your recommendation? How granular one should go with user IDs? One account per process or one account per process and branch? What would be your recommendation? How granular one? It's written twice.
One account per process or one account per process and branch. Boyan, I actually don't know how to answer that question because I think it's specific to your business. I also think it's more of a business analyst question than a techie question. We can take this back to our application guy who does more of this, Tom Gabriel, and ask him this question. So, Boyan, we're going to have to follow up with you on that.
All right. Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Anthony, who asks, how difficult is it to run in a WebSphere AS400 model?
Well, the part about it that can, remember, the orchestrator has to be running over WebLogic server because you need the Oracle, the ADF components. So you can have WebSphere be your JD Edwards HTML piece, but it's not difficult at all to run it on that, but you're still going to have the pieces of the puzzle that have to be ADF have to be running in Oracle WebLogic. So if you're trying to do this entirely in WebSphere, that is not feasible because you need ADF.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Adrian, who asks, what about scheduler and monitoring installation for Orchestrator? What are the steps to install those?
Good questions, Adrian. Let's see. I think let's separate these. The scheduler and monitoring. I'm actually going to have to get back to you because I did not dig into those components as part of this session. Generally speaking, that the CNC folks kind of help with that, but I didn't document those processes due to time. So sorry, I didn't have that for you today. I'll follow up with you on it.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Soam. Thank you for your session, and I was expecting more after the installation part. Do we have any session over that?
We do have sessions. This one, I think even up front, I mentioned that this is the Techie installation side of the equation. We have other sessions on using and designing orchestrations, and I think that's the part you mean because that's the next step. That's actually in conjunction with what Adrian asked for usually using the scheduler and the monitoring piece of it. Those are implementation features, and again, so I didn't cover that in this session. We would need it. This would have to be a 2-hour session, and we do have a separate session on creating orchestrations, setting them up. We have them on our website. You can link to the already recorded sessions.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Sandup. In the AIS configuration, do we need to mention the dedicated JAS server for Orchestrator, or can we mention a load balance URL from where user sessions go to existing pool of JAS instances? What is recommended?
Sandy, another good question. Great question. We got a good, tough crowd here today. You can use the URL from the web browser or from a load balancer, and that is the recommended approach to put that in if you have a load balancer.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Teresa, who asks, you mentioned speaking with Oracle salesmen if our JD E1 is architecture AS400/Power 8 with iSeries and WebSphere. Does Oracle allow Orchestrator to be installed on any architecture? Cannot ADF be installed with WebSphere instead of WebLogic?
Teresa, I have been told that ADF has to be on WebLogic server. And in fact, I've never seen somebody try to install it on WebSphere because we're told it has to be WebLogic with the ADF components. So I can triple check that for you, but I'm 99% certain that you've absolutely got to have the components. But my understanding is that if you're licensed to use Orchestrator, then you should be allowed to use WebLogic in that. That's how Oracle has traditionally done it, and you should contact your Oracle sales guy to double check my comments there. But my understanding is you've got to have WebLogic.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Sandup, who asks, we see issues when 3 to 4 users access Orchestrator, then it causes Orchestrator instance goes down due to out-of-memory errors despite setting enough startup memory. Org Studio we are using is 5.
Okay, that's a specific troubleshooting session, Sandeep. If you'd like to reach out to me, I can do a direct chat with you about that particular instance. I can see what our guys have run across on that. I personally have not run into that.
All right, thank you, John, and everyone. I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry I didn't have the answers to some of the questions. This was I did design this strictly to be get it up and running type of instruction, and there are definitely follow-up sessions for this that need to occur. but we would need another session for the scheduler and the monitoring, and another session for the creating and designing orchestrations, which we do have. So I just didn't do it all today because it's 3 hours worth of sessions.
All right. Thanks, John, and thanks everybody for your questions today. Right. As a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit. You will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast, as well as a copy of the presentation. After today's webcast, we will do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone who attended the entire webcast will be eligible. We will notify the winner. Thanks again for attending our presentation, and have a great day.